This is Brother Brian's third study, Joseph, being a forgiving brother. And our reading is Genesis chapter 37, verses 5 to 18. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him, and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said unto him, Here am I. And he said to him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, They are departed hence, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren, and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him.
My dear brethren and sisters, we are beginning a series that starts with Genesis, and in the previous study that we had, we looked at the earlier stages of Genesis, but today we're going to have a look at the life of Judah and of Joseph, all the J's that were in that family, Jacob as well. But the book is actually, the book of Genesis, is very well put together when you have a quiet look at the sectionizing of the story. It's brilliantly told. It's probably true that if you asked a lot of people that used to go to Sunday school, where some of their preferred lessons came from, you'll probably find that the stories in Genesis have stuck very well compared with probably most areas of the scriptures other than the gospel writings. What made up this man Joseph? Where did he come from? How was it that in the family that Jacob had 12 children, and he was the second last? But how was it that his accomplishments, his notoriety, his achievements, his remarkable skills were so powerfully illustrated in the personage of Joseph more than any of his other brothers? There's a lot of ability in his brothers. The whole lot of them have got skills. They're a very enriched family in many ways. But Joseph is the outstanding person. And the question then comes to us, well, then we've got 12 children. How is it that one becomes so outstanding? and has had that reputation for thousands of years. Let's come to Genesis chapter 37. Genesis 37 is the introduction really of his life. These are the generations of Jacob. It says in 37 and verse 2, Joseph being 17 years old. So you see that even telling the story, although he's certainly not the oldest of the children, he's one of probably the second youngest of the children, yet he's the first mentioned in verse 2. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. That is, they were playing up some distance away from the tent of the family, and some of the brothers became reported on, I suppose, by Joseph. Now it says in verse 3, balancing this record out, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. He made him a coat of many colours, which you're all very familiar with from Sunday school. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. This is not an easy start, is it, for a young man that's making his early strides in his family. The next section sort of puts us into midstream, you might say. From verses 5 through to the end of verse 10, there's an account of how dreams were given to him. 2 dreams. You know, my dear brothers and sisters, this is an amazing book. Those 2 dreams, from verse 5 to verse 10, are the framework of his life. If you ask yourself the question, what was it when Joseph was in the prison? Potiphar put him in the prison. It got worse. He was then in the prison of the prisoners. But what was it when he was in that place? Knew no one, done nothing wrong. This woman had got at him, and he ended up in the prison. But what was it, my dear brothers and sisters? Late at night, in dark Egyptian prison, that helped him to be able to hold on to the things he knew from his childhood. What was it? That's why this framework is put in here at the beginning, verses 5 to 10. It's those 2 dreams, there's others to come, several pairs of dreams. But these are the 2, and they're set that way, aren't they? Much as to say, well, here's the life of Joseph in figure. Because that's what they were. And there isn't any shadow of doubt, is there? I mean, what else did he have? There's no radios and televisions and all the rest that we have in our world today. Books, of course, scarce as hen's teeth. So what's going to keep his fire of faith going in such a strange environment? When he did a great job in Potiphar's house. Potiphar he thought he was the ant's pants. Everything was spotless, everything was done, easy to get on with, very honest person, cooperative, and extremely skillful. Absolutely reliable. What more could you ever want? And yet his wife played a trick on him. She thought he was good looking too. And so she wanted his company. And so she arranged in a very devious way to incorporate into some suspicion. So he ended up in the prison. So you're sitting in the prison that night and thinking, whoa, whatever did I do today that was wrong. And as the hours tick by, you come back to the dreams. That's what you do. You've got no other magazines. You've got no other books. But what you have got is that dream that came to you and told you about your sheath was lifted up against the sheaths in the field of your brothers, your mother, your father. And they bowed down, those sheaths bowed down. And you think, well, it doesn't seem to me that the first chapter's too close to the record. I was promised that there would be some sort of superiority among my family. Where are my family? They wouldn't know where I was. Paid for tuppence, gone into Egypt. And they have brothers themselves, and most of them probably glad that he's gone. I won't have this competitive character around the place, and someone that's always excelling or has the favour of Dad. Or it may be the other one, the second dream he had. Does that give any inferences as to why he is now where he is? He dreamed yet another dream and told it his brethren and said, "Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me." What's that got to do with being a dark Egyptian bedroom, totally strange to you? How do you fit that in to the details? So few details, aren't they? But it's those that form the framework of his faith. The more you think about that thought, the more it intrigues you about the mind of Joseph. He's a deep thinker. And he doesn't give up on the first call. And he doesn't discard it because he believes that the God of Israel had given those dreams. None of the family had them, but one came and then the other came. So pairing up, they kind of told the same story. Even mother was involved in the story. If we slide over to the next column in our same Genesis chapter 37, you begin to sort of see a little bit of what life was like in Jacob's family. Israel said unto Joseph, verse 13, "Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem?" Which was quite a way away from Hebron, where their usual residence was. "Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem?" Well, it's 30 k's away. That's a long way. "Come, and I will send thee unto them." And he said to him, "Here am I." Now, I'd like to just underline that. He was willing. I don't think he wanted to go. None of them were too nice to him, as far as we can estimate. Perhaps Reuben, anything else. He might have been a little bit more charitable when things weren't going too good for Joseph. But no one was really that thrilled about him. And you would have thought that Joseph might have said to his head, "Oh, Dad, they don't want to see me. They give me a hard time when they're here. Why do you want me to go? What am I going to do? None of them talk to me. None of them are nice to me. None of them really want me to be there. How am I going to manage that? I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren." Very positive requirement. "And well with the flocks. and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. You know that report never came, did it? The father's request was, and bring me word again. Underline it, because it's pointed. You can go right now to the end of the story of Jacob and Joseph, and you realise that story about the report never got there, did it? Because in a very short time he was off to Egypt, and he was there for years. And the report of Jacob's stock and circumstances became totally irrelevant. But it's an interesting little phrase, and bring me word again. You would have liked to, I suppose. It was better than what the alternative might have been. Now, it sketches in a couple of other little items here. Verse 15, and a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. The man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? Everything's up and down, isn't it? Did you notice that? Who's this man? We don't know. A certain man found him. I wouldn't be surprised if that was one of God's messengers. It's a long way to go for a single boy from Hebron to Shechem. A certain man was found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. Wandering in the field. He was moving around and seemed to have a mission. His face was down, he was thinking, trying to sort something out. He didn't know quite what to sort out or where to go with it. Which direction did he go? Wasn't he going out there to find out the situation of his brother's cattle and sheep? Well, he's dithering. He's not quite sure as to what to do. It's all like that. And the man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. Now there's a man in the middle of a great big paddock, spreading lands on either side. And somebody asked him what he's doing. And he said, I seek my brethren. See, that's not ordinary, is it? But it is nevertheless in agreement with the rest of the picture, which says in verse 16, I seek my brethren. And that's why we make that the title for this summary of Joseph's life. There could be other equally good summaries, but that's very interesting, isn't it? Every time he's asked something, he's willing to do it. You would have thought that there's good reasons to say to Dad, look, Dad, I'm not terribly good at that stuff anyway. Have you got something a bit more academic or something a bit more we can chat about or something? But he didn't. He was willing to go with his brethren. He was a positive contributor to the environment of his family. So he went after his brethren and found them in Jotham. There's a third little expression. He went after his brethren. There's three of them there, isn't there? And each one is saying, Joseph is in favour of the family life. He is interested in his brothers. He wants to be part of them. Notice that. Very carefully written, isn't it? That's why he was dithering in the field. He didn't know what to do, did he? He was unsure as to how to manage this matter. Perhaps the brethren had gone further away. This man told us, he said, I overheard that they were going to Dothan. That's another 30 k's. You can see why he was having a good think about it, can't you? Very difficult circumstances. Well, we know what happened. And he was picked up by traders that came through the land and were on their way to Egypt. And the brothers had put him down a hole in the ground and left him, and they had nice stewed meat and vegetables, and he was in the dungeon. But one of them particularly had a bent in finance, and he thought it's not a good thing, you've got a product there you could sell. These men passing through, that's what they're all about. You sell something to them and you get something back. I mean, if you just left our brother in the hole, then there's no profit in it. Profit. Poor Judah, he was born with that as a possession. And so our Joseph ends up in Potiphar's house. And he does everything he could. What's he going to do? Whatever does he do? He believes in God. No question of that. But what does he do? This is your room, Joseph, and I want you to keep it clean, and the regulations for your duties here and so on. He took it all in. Yahweh was with Joseph, it says in verse 2, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in this house of his master the Egyptian, and his master saw that Yahweh was with him. His master saw that Yahweh was with him. And Yahweh made all that he did to prosper in his hand. Now apparently it was so well done that you could just look at the place after a short time and you could see that the neighbours have been left behind. This young man's got the place really purring. It's extremely well kept, and the product's coming, everything is in order. So the people looking over from the next door neighbour's property, they said, since that young fella's come, that place has just gone a hell of a road. And it did. His master saw that Yahweh was with him. His master saw that Yahweh was with him. How amazing is that? Who said this Potiphar knew anything about the God of Israel? But somehow he seems to have become aware, and this happened several times in the life of Joseph, that people find that around him things go well. There's something about him that is unusual. Things prosper under his care. They loved his attitude too. He was bright, he was happy. He didn't have any friends. No brothers and sisters to talk to. No mail to get from the letterbox. At least perhaps once a month. No mail at all. He's by himself, an isolated man. And he did everything he could. Came to pass, verse 5, from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that Yahweh blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And if it puts it like that, my dear brothers and sisters, it seems, doesn't it, that it was obvious that was the case. All the other properties were there, they're going along like they did last year. But this one, it's really booming. And all that he had in the house and in the field was doing well. And his master was very happy with it all. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, complete confidence. And he knew not, rather, aught he had. In other words, he didn't look at the books, as it were, he didn't check up on things, because every time he did, Joseph had everything covered perfectly. So what's the use of spending time like that? He'd probably spend a bit more time out on the golf course or something. He was very, very happy. However, his wife thought that Joseph was a pretty special young man, and she attempted to lie with him. She made all the opportunities, and when that didn't work, then she tried to do it virtually physically. And of course we know the story, that he left his garment behind and she took that to Potiphar, and that ended up in him being placed into the prison. So we read in verse 20, Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. Now, if you were Joseph, what would you try to work out from that? Is that helpful to my cause? I believe what God said. I do believe that I'm going to be honoured in a special way with gifts or advances, improvements in my circumstances that will make me more wealthy and more readily recognisable than any in my family. But I've done the best I could possibly have done, and here I am, friends. However, Yahweh was with Joseph, 21, and showed him mercy and gave him favour in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. Here's this little 18-year-older in this prison, doesn't know any of these people. They're all senior people in quite high positions in life. And who's the boss around here? Who keeps charge of the place? Verse 23, the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand. Just like Potiphar thought. You don't have to worry about the details when this young man's there, because Yahweh was with him. Now it says that in verse 21, and it says that again now in verse 23. And again we ask the question, the light's off, it's the middle of the night. What was that young man thinking about? Hasn't got any books. What's he thinking about? Well, he has got a good memory, and all the things that came from Grandpa and great-grandpa in the stories of God working with them. He knows those stories, yes he does. But those stories didn't relate personally to him. God hasn't done this to make it difficult for me, but God has got some purpose in this. Why am I among all these prisoners, most of them well off, good positions in life? Perhaps that will give me a leg up, and some way out of this situation might be found. You can see, can't you, why the dreams were given first. Dreams are quite specific. They only need, 2 lines to state what they are telling. Very simple. So your mind does all sorts of travels to try and work out what it is that the God of Israel, Yahweh, Jacob's, my father's God, Abraham's God. But how does that fit into my life? So it just so happened then that 2 very important members of the leadership of Egypt were put into the prison. The butler of the king of Egypt, 40 verse 1, he was one, and the other was the one that did the baking. They were put in ward in the house of the captain of the guard into the prison, verse 3, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with him, and he served them, and they continued a season in ward. It's the same story, isn't it? He's got all these senior people with considerable status in life, and he's put over all of them. And he does it so well, they don't even bother to check on anything that happens. Well, he asks them, of their circumstances, and they both said, well, we just had a dream. You had a dream? Yes. And you've had a dream. And they said unto him, we have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. He's very sharp, isn't he? Joseph is very sharp, very clear. He can see that those two chaps have worked out themselves that that wasn't accidental. They got the same, on the same night, they got a dream that meant much the same thing. The story was the same. They both got that dream. Woke up in the morning and spoke to their good friend. He said, oh, you know, I had a dream last night. And the other one said, well, so did I. Well, you would start to think, wouldn't you? And then if you moved around the prison, I bet you'd hear that, you know, that young fellow, he's really quite unusual. And he talks about things that others don't talk about, but my word, he keeps this place wonderfully, and you can trust him. And so the two dreams were given. There was the cupbearer, and there was the one that did the cooking for the prison. Well, within 3 days shall Pharaoh, verse 13, lift up thine head and restore thee unto thy place, and thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand, after the former manner when thou wast his butler. But think on me. Now this is interesting. Joseph now gets more open in his request. But think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, please, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this place, this house. Well, what he said about what would happen to either of them did happen. And so the butler continued to be employed in Pharaoh's house, and the other one lost his life. Verse 22, he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them, yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph. So, is that a leg up? Well, you can imagine that Joseph will be really thinking about the dreams that he had. 2 dreams again. They're turning up now. And in a short time, he's in front of Pharaoh himself. Because eventually the butler woke up and said, oh, look, I've done the wrong thing. A good mate of mine, he told me what my dream was. Really? So Joseph was dressed up, and then he came to speak before Pharaoh. So in very short time, he now has actually made acquaintance with Pharaoh. What an amazing circumstance that was. Everyone would have never seen progress, advancement like that in my life. Freak boy. And it's only a short number of days or hours almost that in fact Pharaoh has a dream. 2 dreams. Again, it's a pair. And they're desperate to know what they mean. And the butler remembers that he hasn't given the good report about Joseph. And so he gives the report, and in comes Joseph all dressed up to meet Pharaoh. And the next minute he finds that he's been put over the reassembling of the organisation for food for Egypt. Now, brothers and sisters, when he went to sleep that night, I think that Joseph would begin to say, I can see what those dreams that I had at home, 2 dreams here, 2 dreams there, my 2 dreams, God is working. Whatever I might have thought, when I just went out by my cold self, I can see that God is working. And I'm now in a position one could never have believed that it could be so good as I have found it to be. Well, there's many further steps in that development. There was dreams about 7 good years and 7 bad years. And this young man was put over the appointment of distribution of food through Egypt in that period of time. The consequence of that is that his own family felt the pressure. Back there in Israel, the seasons were poor, and the family of Jacob were finding the pressure until they decided that they'd have to do what other people were doing and go down to the only place that had food, and that was Egypt. And we know, of course, what happened. But it took some time to do that and several trips to do it. I'd like us to have a look at chapter 44. This is when Judah speaks of repentance. Now, Judah was the tough one, and he was also famous for his irresponsible behaviours. There's a whole chapter, chapter 38, which speaks about his misdemeanours in that kind of way. And he's very tough. He's interested in money, and he really didn't care one iota about Joseph, but now he does. Why? Because things are grim. So we read in verse 18 in chapter 44, Judah came near unto him and said, O my Lord, he's speaking to his brother, let thy servant, I pray thee, speak a word in my Lord's ears. There's a miracle taking place. And let not thine anger burn against thy servant, for thou art even as Pharaoh. Look how he put it. So deep was the problem that the family had for food, they'd called people by the best names they could ever think of. My Lord asked his servants, verse 19, saying, have ye a father or a brother? And we said unto my Lord, who's the my Lord? That's Joseph. We have a father, an old man, a child of his old age, a little one, and his brother is dead. And he's standing in front of him. And he alone is left of his mother, and his father loveth him. Thou saidst unto thy servants, bring him down unto me. My dear brothers and sisters, can you imagine the impact of that? This tough nut older brother that would balk at nothing. And now he's calling Joseph his Lord. Joseph could clearly see that God was in his life. Things that just don't happen were happening time and time again. This is a beautiful section of Joseph's life. Thou saidst unto thy servants, verse 23, except your youngest brother come down with you, ye shall see my face no more. And it came to pass, when we came up unto thy servant my father, we told him the words of my Lord, the words of Jacob his son, of Joseph his son. And our father said, go again and buy us a little food. The problem was, of course, that Dad didn't want to let go of Benjamin, the youngest. And so Judah, that was such a self-interested person, is now brought to pleading for the younger brother and pleading in the face of his second younger brother. What an incredible, what a remarkable thing that is. And Joseph knows it all along, because of course he knows who they are. And they're telling him what they've been saying to their dad back at the farm. This was very, very heartening news, wasn't it? For Joseph, he knew that things were well on the way in developing God's purpose. And so we read in the last little section of that, "It shall come to pass," verse 31, "when he seeth that the lad is not with us, that he will die. And thy servants shall bring down the grey hairs of thy servant our father." By the way, they were Jacob's favourite words. "The grey hairs of thy servant our father, with sorrow to the grave." This is the sketch of Judah's words to his brother. And his brother would have picked all those words up with tremendous feeling. The image is given of his little brother Benjamin, the grief and the concern of his much-loved father. And he can see the hand of God is right behind all of this now. "For thy servant," verse 32, "became surety for the lad." That's what Judah now accepts as his role. "Unto my father, saying, If I bring him not unto thee, then I shall hear the blame to my father forever. Now therefore I pray thee, let thy servant abide instead of the lad, a bondman to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brethren." It's just astounding. Now Judah's prepared to take the place of Benjamin. And Benjamin can go, but Judah will remain. That's an enormous shift. God is truly working. So, more and more we can see that when he sought his brethren in the beginning, it eventually took him into situations that were just remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And through all of that, Joseph has such a remarkable disposition. For all that they had done to him, he gave them every opportunity to clear the way. So in chapter 46, when Israel, that is, when the father, verse 28 of the previous chapter, when Jacob is putting the whole situation together, he says, "It is enough. Joseph, my son, is yet here, and I will go and see him before I die." What a transfer of mind, heart, spirit this is. And now the older father, he must have been at this stage something like about 120 or something in years. And he's now prepared to go down into Egypt to meet Joseph. Well, we can't measure that, can we? Life's too comfortable and easy. So easy to get what you want, whether it's on this or the phones or whatever it is. Everything's easy to get. But in those circumstances, that is most remarkable verse indeed. Israel took his journey with all that he had. He knew he wasn't coming back, with all that he had, and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices unto the God of his father Isaac. It's a lovely verse, isn't it? That's where Abraham made some of his covenant relationships with the people that were round about. And now all of the family have come to Beersheba, the well of the oath, and offered sacrifices unto the God of his father Isaac. Verse 2, "And God spake unto Israel in the visions of the night, and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here am I. And he said, I am God, the God of thy father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will make of thee a great nation there. I will go down with thee into Egypt, and I will also surely bring thee up again, and Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes. So now the father is encouraging the children to accept the circumstances that are coming. They're now doing all the things that have been determined through the life of Joseph. And Jacob rose up from Beersheba, verse 5, and the sons of Israel carried Jacob their father and their little ones, their wives, and the wagons, which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. Pharaoh sent a lot of goods and so on back to the family, as much as they might need until they could pack up and get to Egypt. They sent them in some Egyptian wagons. When Jacob looked out of the window, he saw these wagons and he thought, they're not made out here. They're Egyptian wagons. And that's how he knew that this was no fraud put up by the other sons. This was a true representation of Egypt in their lives. Now, my dear brothers and sisters, that story is the most moving stories. We've had mountains shifted in terms of the attitudes of people and the positions they have with others. And the work of God is becoming more and more powerful as they see that. But can you imagine then going down past Beersheba, which is quite down the south, isn't it? And then you go from there to Egypt and you come into Goshen, which is sort of the first town as you're going into Egypt. Flat country, but very prosperous country indeed. And that's where now they are on their way to live. What an incredible change has taken place that God has arranged. And to think now that Joseph is going to have his father in that circumstance. And you know, it's a new family. This 46th chapter, it tells you all about the families that came. It's just full of that. It says, like verse 6, they took their cattle and their goods, which they had gotten in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt, Jacob and all his seed with him. Say that there was already somebody in the land, Joseph himself, administering his matters in Parliament. And unto Joseph, verse 20, the land of Egypt were born Manasseh and Ephraim. So there's his boys as well. They're all on that page. All of Israel's on that page. They're all down there now and on their way to it. And as they look out down the path, there's a vehicle that's coming at them at a very strong pace. And it's Judah. Verse 28, he sent Judah before him unto Joseph to direct his face unto Goshen. Judah. Yes, he's become a responsible member of the family, doing the tough jobs that needed a bit of thinking about. And it says in verse 29, it just needs imagination, this verse, doesn't it? Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to meet Israel, his father, to Goshen, the first bit of Egypt. It's not Israel coming down to where Joseph was. It's Joseph, this amazing young boy. He goes down to his greatly respected father. What a beautiful part of the story that is. And the two of them had the same disposition to each other. They presented himself, he did unto him, he presented himself unto him. Didn't wait for Grandpa to come up and say, nice to see you, son. He presented himself to the older, more superior person as he pictured it, to his dad. And he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. Ever seen somebody do that? It really means something, doesn't it? When the emotions are such that you just can't stop crying. This is a very grown man. two very grown men. But there was such a rich love, though they'd been separated from all these years. There was some good in Judah in the later statements about the individual sons will give evidence of that. But to see now that family all gathered, all that family on the whole of that page, all of them, can you imagine it? You have a family reunion? When have you ever seen a reunion like this? There's 70 people that are invited to this. And that's the attitude of the one that saved them. He loves them. And they're all being brought together. And the dear old dad, he's been given the honour of the circumstances. And all he's done is really get in the wagon and come down. But the heart was moved because he now will get that report, won't he, about the flock of his brothers that he was asked to bring back. Israel said unto Joseph, Now let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive. It's a beautiful way to speak to your son, isn't it? You know, this is a long time ago. People had very beautiful ways in which they spoke to each other, particularly in family life. Don't let us lose that. Insist that the children in our Bible school, at our school, or wherever, in our families, that they retain respect and love for their older people and are encouraged to learn from them. This is a very beautiful example of that. Israel rather, is the oldest of them, but Joseph is the second most important person on the earth. Pharaoh was the number one. Joseph is number two. And this is all of Joseph's family. And so they began to spread out in the land of Egypt. So you can see now that those little dreams that they had originally had budded out into something that was wonderful and real and was laying the foundations for another stage in the development of the family. Thank you.